Hey there, you beautiful souls. Welcome to another Spiritual Experience Wednesday. Just make sure that sound is working here. And we're all good. So, yeah, this one's an exciting one. Now, awakening to my worth, big journey. In the description, if you see the little preludes, that kind of gives you a little bit of a understanding of where I came from in this journey and how I got to here. Now, in the last video, my academic awakening, I talked about just the different journey of unfoldments that went through in my collegiate career. Now, I kind of tease the one that we're going to be talking about today in terms of my South Africa work study at Northwest Potchefstroom University in South Africa. And this one was an activation that really propelled me forward and I would say internally got me back on track. So if you haven't checked out those previous ones, I highly recommend. It's going to give a little bit more context and weight to where I was at. Now, we bring it back to that junior year, and I discovered an LSAMP program, Louis Stokes Minority Achievement Participation Program. And I had met a wonderful woman named Joanna Fitzgerald. So, Joanna, if you're watching, huge shout out to you because you saved my life. And I've always been blessed with different angels along the way, but I was really at my lows of lows. During college, I had seen so much of the falsehoods that were really deeply ingrained in our institutions, and it kind of broke me. And this is already after being broken and humbled and being kind of lost in the fray of the spiritual awakening and the unfoldments that arise with that. And I was so alone, I felt so disconnected from my peers. And at this point, junior year, I just didn't feel quite myself. And largely that was due to not being able to really relate or connect with anyone on these deeper levels. And, you know, Joanna was a grown woman, had kids, had a family, gone through academics and was just in charge of a bunch of different programs. And she was a voice that could actually hear me, that could hear my journey and didn't judge or critique it. It was very unlike what I had experienced, even with like some TAs. I did have good relationships with some, and especially some of the professors, but I also encountered a lot of those that were just incredibly judgmental. And especially amongst my peers, they just didn't really get it. Even if I did open up about it, I never felt safe to fully be because everyone was still stuck in that college identity. And I was really kind of beyond that at that point where I was seeking to be something more than who I am right now and constantly questioning and constantly seeking out truth and different information for myself to really just grow and level up. So, she, through various conversations, she kind of pitches this program that came through, and it's a work study that we have with one of the partner universities from UMass Amherst in South Africa. And at this point, with where I'm at with like my self esteem and how I am internally, I was not gonna do it. I was just like, no, whatever. I'm not worth it. And that's kind of like the energy that I had during that year. I was also dealing with things, with my partner at the time, and she has her own intimacy issues, but I never felt really fully loved during this period. I didn't feel like I was being seen by anyone, even those closest to me. And that made me even more isolating internally, where I would still play face and hang out with people, but internally it was pretty hollow inside. It's kind of like when, anytime an orbital kind of enters into a new valence electron, right? There's a lot of potential energy in there. And I don't have the words for this back then, but what I was experiencing is essentially is like a massive awakening unfoldment. My usual self was probably like this, and I was getting used to being in an energy state about 12, if not 20 times larger. So I felt so small within myself. I felt so weak. I felt so tired. I felt so drained. I just felt so raw and vulnerable and sensitive, yet also unloved, unwitnessed, unheard, unseen. So it was kind of a cluster of stuff going on inside. And she pressed me to put my name in. She kind of saw my hesitation, my reservation, very tepid in the sense of like, oh, I don't know, wishy washy. And she was like, just do it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I'm like, okay, fine. So I put my name in, put why this would be important to me, da 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 da. And I get selected amongst a bunch of different students throughout campus. And it's me, myself, and then one of my homies, now homies, I should say, from UMass. And then there's people from different universities that got selected as well. Because it's like kind of like a New England umbrella branch program. So after junior year, May to June, for about 5 weeks, we got sent off. And I was, told that this was going to be a biology opportunity for me to really learn different aspects of health and sciences. And it was not at all what I got there. When I arrived, they pretty much told us, like, oh, yeah, by the way, this is just for engineers. And everyone else was like an engineering major. I was not. But, and there was a little bit of like energy and tension with that. And I was just excited. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do it. I come from a family of engineers. Why not? And you got to give another shout out to Harald, Gerald, but Harald with the Afrikaans accent. He was really open, to just taking on like an understudy just to help him with his project. And it was renewable energy. It was a hydrogen fuel cell. He was implementing and building that out on the campus. And my job was essentially to optimize the system, so to come at it from a different angle personally and utilize the different aspects of biology and all the different fields that I actually do know, and was able to implement some really cool things. And I think throughout the entire journey, culturally, I learned real quick that South Africans are different because we were taking like coffee breaks, some rooibos tea, but because I didn't really drink too much coffee back then, but we were taking breaks like every like 15 minutes, like honestly, like at like I would say the most social days. And then if not, like every half hour, every hour. And every time that I was talking with these graduate students, it finally felt like I was actually understood with the things that I was speaking. And, again, all these people are in like their late 20s, some 30s. And I'm just, 21, just pitching all these different things, talking about like geopolitics, all these different like aspects of knowledge that I know. And I was like heavily consumed in terms of my own researching back in college. And it wasn't like a talking and just it being like, I'd say left on deaf ears. It was actually like a tennis match. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's a great point. Well, what about this?" And it was the first time that like I would say almost like intellectual stimulation in a sense where it was like something I was really passionate about, but it was also to the next level of here I am in this foreign land talking with dudes like some of them twice my age in terms of some of the professors that we were chatting with, but older people. And it was just like, I don't know, it just felt so comfortable. It felt so at home. And for me, that was just like, kind of emboldened me even more just to like really nerd out with them. And I learned so much, and I like to say I'm kind of like a jack of all trades. I know most fields of knowledge because I've made an intention to actually research and look into some of these things. Because, for me, the human experience, we have to kind of understand as many things as we can. That's the whole purpose of life in my eyes. But when it comes to it, I was able to actually find people that also had that same like kind of polyglot or poly learning understanding to things where they understood that there's nuances to complex issues, that it wasn't just one thing, that there's an idea and a mind frame outside of, America, which was so refreshing for me because again, I went to like UMass Amherst, kind of a party school, go America, lots of crazy shit there. But I heard so many times like, you're really smart for an American, or I haven't met an American like you before. And, it was kind of like people might hear this and be like, oh, there's Peter stroking his ego. But I think it's really important to understand that I was so depressed during this period of my life because I was around more people than I'd ever been around. And I felt more alone and lonely than ever. And, there's a healthy aspect to speaking life into someone that's not egoic. And when I was hearing these things from these like these grad students and professors, like it was speaking life into me, and it silenced so much of the negativity in my own head at that point of I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I was stupid, that no one's going to get me, no one understands me, I'm crazy, I'm losing it, because that's also one of the dangers of the awakening process is that if you're not around people that can actually witness you and see you and mirror the things that you're going through, you are so ungrounded and dissociated and detached from, quote unquote reality, like normie thinking, that it will make you go crazy, like even more crazy than the apparent craze and days that you're in, because you're just in the unknown, you're learning, you're growing. And if there's no one that can give you some truth to ground you, you can just get lost. And this is where like this journey really was one of the deepest blessings that I had in my experience throughout college, because it was that reawakening of my own inner fire, my own inner worth. And it kind of just continued to evolve, like from the social outings to the hanging out to even just like training, like going to the gym, hanging out with the guys when we were there. Um, Even just seeing like how we worked out, how we showed up, how we hung out, and how we like just played. It was all stuff that just brought more life to me. And we were even watching a movie, Limitless, Bradley Cooper. I only seen it that one time. And watched it and just gave like an amazing, like, wow, that movie like was also really important for me and my journey back then, because again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, it's been a long time, so shame on you, I guess. It's a good movie. But guy gets this pill, makes him a genius, and what does he do? He seeks to better the world ultimately. And I remember speaking on this of how, like, wow, that was really profound. Like, that was great. Yeah, there's always like movie semantics and crazy stuff that goes on in cinema, but the essence of the story is like when you are empowered with truth, when you are empowered with a knowing, it is your duty and responsibility to help others. And that's one of those like core truths that I was really like trying to make into a cohesive, I would say, like motto, mantra, slogan. And that movie kind of like clicked. And I remember Ryan, like shout out Ryan, like I speak this after the movie's over, and he just like cheesing so hard. He's like, one time. This guy watches it one time. And he was just giving me, appreciation for a dope thought that got everyone thinking, got everyone talking. And I found that that was like a lot of the roles while I was out there, was just like providing insights and just statements and just my own inner perspective that would cause even more of like an evolution of conversation, versus back at school. It was like if I would say my truth, it'd just be like crickets. And then it's like, all right, cool, fuck me, right? Sweet. So to be able to actually be amongst people who could, again, like hear you and witness you, serve so much more for that inner worth that I really can't even put it into words sometimes, because the only, I guess I could say, cliche thing that we would say is that it saved my life. Like it saved that fight. It saved that, I would say, like my inner like being, because it's youthful, it's playful, it's curious. And through hanging out with all these people in this work study itself, it really did just, it brought me back, and then there's even the socialization aspects of people and just interacting with, even just ladies and getting hit on and all the things back then. In a relationship where I didn't feel like I was attractive, and it still didn't really settle. That didn't really hit me until like my mid 20s. Gonna be honest here. That's a whole other story, and it will be talked about at some point. But um, I kind of realized it was like, oh, like people are interested in me. That's interesting. That's unique. I'm not really sure about that, because I guess one thing that I've come to understand is people treat you really awkwardly if you make them like feel a certain type of way, whether it be, romantically, sexually excited, even like intellectually intimidated, spiritually standoff. Like, so most of my social interactions are when people are kind of at their like clunkiest and crunchiest, and it just makes me super clunky and crunchy because I'm hella sensitive to people and really bad anxiety in like large crowds for the most part. And it just got to this point where just through hanging out and like just essentially partying with a bunch of different people, I started to realize it's like, oh, like I'm actually someone that people desire and people want. And in my relationship back then, I just did not feel that. And it's one of those things where people like to say, especially in the spiritual community, that desire is bad. And this is a whole other kind of like inner tangent, but I see desire as kind of like a negative egoic, like an attachment and addiction aspect. Aspiration is something that like you're kind of yearning for, you're hopeful for, you're wishful for, but it's not something that you're really like held on tight to. It would just be like, that'd be really great if I could have that. But want is a core thing that is not good or bad in the human experience. Source wanted every one of us to exist, so we're here, You can't say that that's bad or wrong, right? So to feel wanted is something that is core within our being. It's something that people need to really stay afloat. If you feel like you're disregarded, if you feel like you're discarded, if you're just kind of just isolated like that, it creates so many negative spirals. And again, like even socially, and in this sense, eyes and gaze from the opposite sex. It was something that I was like, oh wow, like Flirty Pete's coming back. That's interesting. And it wasn't just like, I guess you'd say like people like my age. I think one of the most nourishing times that I had was just like having a conversation. And we hung out a few times during that like stay down there. But it was like this CEO who was like in her 40s, and she was a doctor and crazy successful. And it was again that same intellectual stimulation, being able to go back and forth and have a conversation, and then being like, how old are you, how old are you, no way, no way, because people couldn't believe it. And that for me was something that was so, again, just like deeply nourishing, because it's not just people at college, folks. Like, I think I should always make this clear, like, for the longest time, really up until like my father's passing, my own family couldn't even hear me. Like they couldn't, they I'm gonna be real, still can't to the most part, but like they can actually, the door's open. It's ajar. But for the longest time, like the door was just closed. There was nothing that I would say that would be met with any type of witnessing, any type of love, any type of, honestly, like respect. So just as much as my life in my early years kind of went, always kind of seeking that safety outside of myself, because like my home life wasn't right. You know, my home life wasn't nourishing or safe or enjoyable, I should say, that everything around became that safety net. And I started to see those things that had failed me in high school and like especially early college to start to come back to the forefront of just, wow, like this is actual nourishment. Like this is actually fun. And I found myself having joy in life again. You know, and from the whole Africa experience of waking up and seeing the sunrise, like the Lion King, like, like it was the stuff that everything was getting so cinematic. And I, even now I use that term, but I didn't have that back then. I just knew that like, wow, life is just really, really fun right now. I love being in different cultures. I love learning different languages and picking up Afrikaans and then just chatting with the locals and our chaperone Pierre Jobert. Shout out to you, bro. Like another great person who was able to just go deep with, you know, seeing the night sky out in the bush and seeing the Milky Way, because there's just no lights where we're at. You know, there were so many moments that really brought a deep satisfaction to life and warmed me up from the inside out. And that's the thing that I haven't had in a long time. And it really did kickstart a whole season of growth and like, yeah, I fucking got this again. You know, it's the it's the Austin Powers aspect. Like I got my mojo back, baby. And it was mad fun. And in terms of the overall work study, um, the things that I brought up in terms of some of like static things that you could just redesign that would create more efficiencies for the systems themselves, different containers, different parts, and even just some aspects of like the housing for these units in terms of like safety and keeping things regulated temperature wise. All of the stuff that I pitched got implemented, which was cool, you know, and it completely changed the way that Harald was like, oh snap, like, okay, I see you. And when it came down to it, it was a whole new experience, completely different subject and topic of what I had been studying. There were so many aspects from like the academic, the personal, the, I would say like we can just say superficial, like the appearance wise, my looks, like the play, the intellectual aspects. There were so many things that just like got reactivated, and it felt just like gears just got turned back on. And when I came back from the work study, it was like I was in an entirely different world. My ex partner at the time, she had like been hanging out with some kind of toxic people and like had her own physical things go down. And like when I came back, it was kind of just like, I'm back with children. Like, and it finally made me understand why I had been feeling so shitty. Honestly, like having that contrast and the juxtaposition of when I got back to kind of seeing the chaos and the ridiculousness, it was like, okay, cool. But from that moment when I got back in June at some point, I can't remember the date, didn't have it written down, but that's when I kind of made this internal decision of like, I'm going to get ready for life outside of college right now, because there is more than just these kind of like playground settings and these, this is where I will be completely honest in the situation. This is kind of where the dangers of some of these things go on when you have no one to help kind of keep you grounded, is because it was getting a little self-righteous, because I was like, ugh, everyone here is children, like ridiculous. But as much as there was a little bit of that like tainting it, there was so much focus on changing the way that I was going to communicate with people. That was like a conscious effort to unpack. I was leaning even deeper into my spiritual practices, leaning even deeper into like the all the different realms of research that I could unfold and unpack, because ultimately it brought me into points of greater harmony and alignment. And then so much so that it emboldened me to put my name in for even more different like little work study things. And then I ended up working at this COSI Tech challenge with NOAA and UConn and a few different universities, and doing some ocean research and field work, which is another really profound experience in and of itself that just changed how I viewed myself. And then again, working in the biophysics lab, like all these things just kind of just were reaching such a really cool point of just connectedness, excuse me, that I finally started to feel more of myself again. And it's always weird how that happens, like when people think that you're doing okay and you're not, and then you really go through something life changing and now you are feeling okay. It was met with a lot of tension, and me just leaning into myself more turned so many people off in my orbit back then. And from just being agitated and, my own little like self-righteous, like, we need to be better than this, guys, energy was a little volatile. And it's unfortunate in how things played out, but I know, everyone grows and everyone goes in their own way and their own path. But it was one of those things where by the time I got out of college, it was like, all right, cool. That was an interesting experiment. But in terms of everything that I had gone through before college, through college, it was the journey that I needed to wake up into me. And that journey would still only unfold even more as I continue to develop and grow. But South Africa was definitely like a catalyst. It was the beginning, the birthing. It was the initial spark and ember of the small flame of my own heart that really began to grow and thrive. And even from like the intellectual, the personal, the communication, all the different changes that I was going through consciously, even physically, it brought forth so many different things of like, wow, like I'm going to use these techniques that I learned mastering the braai, the barbecue, like South African version of barbecue, and just utilizing my knowledge of culinary cuisine to master different cooking styles. And really that conscious transition of like, I'm going to eat more, like, I should say, like non-meat things for my plate, because that was the one thing that I should mention about South Africa is like the breakfast that they catered for us every morning and just like freshly prepared. It was so good. The juice, nectar of the gods, like, but it opened me up in terms of, what is a portion size, because things are a little bit more humble out there and they're a little bit more realistic. It's not like the American, the whole plate's the size of the meat, so I was able to see what a balanced, I would say, like dish looked like. And being able to implement that for myself changed a lot in terms of how I even approached my own cooking that year. Doing different experiments, getting rid of milk and dairy, a little bit of cheese and some ice cream, but no milk anymore. And that in and of itself just like brought about so many rapid changes. I lost 10 pounds, I think, in a week from not drinking milk. Because, I was raised to drink a glass of milk with every meal. And I just noticed like physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, I was just cleaning and clearing out and getting into a more healthy and aligned place. And I gotta thank all y'all at NWU for helping me get back on track within my own beingness. Yeah, I feel complete in that one. I just always wanted to like highlight that like specific story, because again, like there's a little bit more that I didn't want to and couldn't get into at the last one because it was already kind of long. But I think one of the biggest things is when you're, you go through an ego death, and I hate that term, but when you go through a big spiritual shift and your whole world and identity and things are just gone, it does, there is a lot of grief and a lot of energies that kind of stick around with that. And that is the danger of doing things like that alone. I've gone through it myself personally, because now I know my path is to help teach and to help point the way for others, so they don't have to get caught up in those cul-de-sacs. But you have to really know them highly detailed inside and out in order to help point the way, so people can have a high success rate at making it out of the darkness in good spirits and intact. And for myself, it was really an opportunity for me to just experience firsthand, like, no, man, you're dope. You're cool. Like, you got it. You're smart. And silence all of those thoughts like that. And I know I wouldn't have made it out of college without that experience, because it catalyzed so many different events for me to step up and be vulnerable. So yeah, thanks for dropping in. Don't forget to smash that like, subscribe, share if you haven't. May the fruit of knowledge offer you a seed, and in that seed may your love, will, and intuition give life and nourishment. For a tree shall grow, and in its shade may you find peace, and offer peace to all who ask. Namaste. I bow the divine within you. I love you so much. I'll check in with you Sunday. Peace.